Hi chess punks, welcome back to another one of my videos. So for today's video I actually have a very nice and very interesting and very instructive game for you guys. Those who are absolute beginners, they should absolutely know this game because I found this game one of the very instructive games that you can learn every concept, every tactic that is there in the game of chess that can be learned from this game. This game has literally everything. It has the tactics, it has a very nice technique, and this game is absolutely filled with class. So enough of my talk now, let us actually proceed to the game. So the game is between Akiba Rubinstein, who is with the white pieces, and Aldrich Duras, who is with the black pieces. So the game goes on normal as d4, d5, knight to f3, and c5 from Duras. Now he is now attacking in the center, challenging this central pawn. But Rubinstein actually just defends it with the move e3, and we have knight to f6 from Duras. Rubinstein in this position actually decides to relinquish the tension in the center by taking, and now Duras plays this move of queen to a5. You can see that he is now attacking and regaining this pawn that is there on the c5 square because he was down a pawn after Rubinstein had decided to take here. But actually in this position you can already see that black is actually making a mistake. He is breaking a principle. A very known principle that is there in the game of chess is that you should not bring your queen out in the opening itself. Also already Duras is making this elemental error of bringing his queen out in the opening to gain this just for gaining of this pawn. What Duras instead could have done is simply played this move of e6, and now you can see that this bishop is attacking this pawn, and after, let's say, white tries to defend it, you can just simply play this move of a5, and you can see that now this pawn is attacked because, let's say, if you decide to take here, I can just take back, and you can already see that this pawn is very weak and will fall in the future. If, let's say, white anyway is stubborn and, let's say, he decides to defend it with a move like c3, then already you can take and play something like b6, wherein now of course this pawn is now falling. White cannot defend it with a move like bishop to a3 because I can just take, and after you take, just take this bishop, and let's say after knight takes, I can give this check on a5 with the knight hanging at the end, and black will have two pieces for the rook, which will be very nice. So that was the way that black should have proceeded in that position. But Duras actually decides to bring his queen out in the opening, and now we will learn why this is a mistake and you should not bring out your queen in the opening itself. So Rubinstein decides to block with the knight by playing this move of knight to d2, and Duras accomplishes his mission of taking the pawn. And now Rubinstein plays this very nice move of a3. Now in this position you can see that the queen is already out, and Rubinstein now plays this move of a3. Now he is threatening to play the move of b4. Now one of the reasons you should not get your queen out in the opening itself is because of this reason. Now you can see that the queen is the most valuable piece. So whenever some less valuable piece attacks it, it has to move and lose a tempo. So what Rubinstein is doing with this move of a3, he wants to gain a tempo on this queen with a move like b4, and then the queen will have to retreat and it will be white who will have the upper hand. So because of that, Duras has to now go back with his queen and actually waste a tempo in bringing his queen first here, then taking this pawn, and then going back. Black is actually wasting a lot of time, and that is why you should not get your queen out in the opening itself. And now we have this move of c4 from Rubinstein, and you can see that he is clearly attacking the central pawn, wherein if you decide to take, which actually happened in the game, Duras maybe should have tried to hang on to the center with a move like e6. Yeah, that leads to a isolated pawn structure, but it is actually better because after it takes, not only are you relinquishing the central control but also helping white to develop his pieces. After Rubinstein decides to take with a knight, you can already see that all of the pieces of white are actually threatening to come out, and only queen is being developed by black. So after that we actually have bishop to g4 from black. You can see that now Duras is trying to pin this knight that is there on the f3 square, and we have the move of b4 from Rubinstein. He is now trying to expand on the queen side and create some space for himself, which will be better for him. So that is why you can see that now already some moves like b5 could be threatened in the future, but right now Rubinstein decides that he has to now get all the pieces active. You can see that all of Rubinstein moves up until now have been developing moves, pushing this c4, then taking with his knight, developing b4, and then also developing his bishop. You can see that Rubinstein is developing a new piece every time, and that is how you should actually play chess. So after bishop to b2, now we have a very huge blunder or mistake from Duras. He actually plays this move of b4 b5 actually, and you can already see that this move does not look very nice to you, because already this loses to a very nice combination that Rubinstein actually played in the game. But even if the combination does not work, you can already see that this square becomes very weak, and if the tactic was also not working, then in the future white could have easily been better because of a very nice square like c5 that has been weakened. So a horrible move from Duras actually to play b5, because you can see that the combination actually works in this game because this pawn is undefended, and you might be knowing of the saying that is there in the chess that loose pieces drop off. No piece is actually defending this pawn that is there on the b5 square, and let's say if I could attack it, then I would be able to just take it. So that's why you should always see that most of your pieces are defending everything, so that none of the tactics work against you. So actually now Rubinstein plays this very nice move of knight to e5, and taking full advantage of the king being in center and black pieces being not able to move freely. So now you can see that this knight is actually defending this knight, but you can see that this knight is being pinned by this bishop. So you might say, what happens if I just decide to take here? And that's what exactly what Duras played in the game. But now that move actually flops to this super cool move. You are seeing that this knight is pinned, but this pin that is there, it is not actually absolute pin, it is a relative pin. Now relative pin is something that absolute pin is pin that like you can't move the knight at all. Like if there was a king here instead of the king, it was impossible to move this knight. But since there is a queen here, this becomes a relative pin. Now I can actually move the knight, but if I move the knight, that leads to loss of material. But that's what exactly what Rubinstein does in this position. He takes on e5 with his knight, leaving the queen hanging. But after Duras decides to take in this position, he just takes the pawn on the b5 square, and you can already see that this king that is there is now starting to feel a bit weak because of white's phenomenal pieces that are there on the board. So actually in this position, Duras decided to defend with his knight, because let's say if you decide to go move with your king, then already after rook decides to take here and king moves to the c8 square, you can see that after bishop to a3 check, this king has not many squares to itself, and only square that is possible is king to b8. And here comes now a spectacular move, knight to c6. Yes, the knight is hanging, but after knight is hanging, but let's say after you decide to take, here comes the move of bishop to e5 check. Now the queen has to block, because you can see the king has no squares for itself. So let's say queen decides to block here, and now another spectacular move you could play in this position is rook to c1, not even caring about taking this queen, but rather threatening a mate in 1 on c8 square, which is actually unstoppable, because you can see that the queen cannot go back because it is pinned to this king, and there is no move you can play. This bishop cannot move, so that the rook can defend. This rook is completely paralyzed, so I would be threatening a mate in 1 here, which would be unstoppable. So Duras actually does not move his king, and he instead decides to block with his knight. So in this position, actually the best move is to just take with a rook, and you can see that I am now just threatening to win everything. because knight is pinned and it cannot move. But in this position actually Rubinstein decides to take with his bishop, and now again you can't move your king because after takes it would be very hard for you to survive that position. So instead Duras decides to give back material, and after queen takes, knight takes back and bishop decides to retreat on the h5 square. Now you can already see that thanks to that brilliant combination from Rubinstein, he is up a piece and has a 2-on-1 majority on the queen side. So basically 2-on-1 majority means that you can see that black has one pawn on the queen side, whereas white has two pawns, and if I am successfully able to push this pawn, then I'll be able to create passer on the queen side. So after bishop to h5, the knight decides to just retreat here, and you can see that white has managed to get a very good position out of the opening. So we have now rook to c8 from black side, because now there is two open files that are present on the board. So black decides to take control of the one of the open files, because you can see that the white rook cannot come to the d1 square because the rook is controlling. So also you are now blocking the rook's access to the c1 square, and hope for the best that you can compensate for a loss of a pawn. But now we have another brilliant move from Rubinstein. He plays this move of g5. Now this move is very good because of the reason that you can see that in this position black has two bishops, and usually two bishops are very good compensation for a pawn. In this position it does not work, but usually if you are a pawn down and you have a bishop pair, then usually you can put some stiff resistance against your opponent. But Rubinstein with this move of g4 now absolutely kills all the counterplay that Duras has with the bishop pair, because now bishop has to retreat to the g6 square, and now after knight takes and pawn takes, you can already see that black no longer has the bishop pair, and the material is just +1 for white. So another very important thing you should know whenever you are playing chess is that if your opponent has a bishop pair, then your topmost priority should be to somehow exchange one bishop such that your opponent does not have two bishops and has to content with one bishop. Now two bishops are very good because one bishop controls light square, one bishop controls dark squares, and they have a very nice synergy between them. So you should always try to exchange one pair of one bishop, and that's exactly what Rubinstein does here with this move of g5, and knight takes on g6. You can see that yes, we have managed to get rid of the bishop pair, but now black actually has an open file which he can use for the attack. But Rubinstein now plays this move of bishop to d4, and you can already see that he is putting attack on the a7 pawn. At the same time, he maybe has ideas of putting the bishop on the c5 square, and after bishop to d4, Duras just defends his pawn with the move like a6, and we have king to d2. Now another instructive movement in this game. Now you can see that these rooks are right now not connected. And also with this move of king to d2, what you are doing is you are connecting your rooks at the same time, since it's an end game, and in the end game king is a very strong piece. So what Rubinstein does it with this move of king to d2, he is getting his final piece into the game and also connecting his rook, and such that you can already see that this king is on the last square, whereas this king is surely making strides into the center, and white will be just better here. So after that we have this move of f6 from black, and he is now threatening to dislodge this bishop from the very good d4 square. But Rubinstein plays another very good move, that is rook to c1. Now you can see that why this is a good move, because there is one open file that was available that is being taken by black. And what this move rook to c1 does, it asks black one question: either you give up the c file, that is the only open file, or you just take and then I take back with my rook and I get the open file anyway. So like Duras actually decides to take here, and we have rook takes from Rubinstein. Now of course you shouldn't take with your king, because this rook is doing nothing here protecting this pawn. You should not worry about this pawn being attacked. You should just take with rook here, because let's say if your opponent decides to take here, then you can just give this check here, and after king decides to, let's say, retreat, because you can see that already it can't come here because the bishop would be just hanging. So king has to actually retreat to the f7 square, and now you can simply defend your pawn on f2 square, and now you are threatening to just win this pawn, wherein you will have a very nice connected passes which will be absolutely difficult for black to stop. So Rubinstein actually understands that he does not have to defend that pawn on the h2 square and decided to take with the rook here, gaining control of this open c file. And now Duras actually also does not take this pawn on the h2 square for the reasons that we just saw. He instead plays this move of e5, and now we have bishop to c5 from Rubinstein. He now wants to exchange one pair bishops, remaining pair of bishops, because he understands that the rook endgame is completely winning for him, all thanks to this queen side majority and this very passive rook that is there on the h file. So for the lack of better move, now actually Duras decides to take on the h2 square, because even if you, let's say, decide to take here, that is also losing after a move like rook to h2. And if you decide to come with your king on the d2 square, probably preventing the infiltration on the 7th rank, I can just play a move like rook to a5, and you can of course take my h2 pawn, but I will first actually defend here and then take the a5 pawn, a6 pawn, and you can see that my queen side majority will again queen. So for that, actually Rubinstein's opponent Duras actually decided to first itself take, and we have takes from Rubinstein. And after king takes, he again plays this move of king to e2, a very good prophylactic move, defending the f2 pawn and now threatening to just infiltrate into black's position, take this pawn and be completely winning. So now we have e4. Now Duras is probably trying to restrict white's movement with the move like e6, but that just does not work, because white has this very good move of rook to c5. You can already see that the rook is now attacking and is completely active. So another one of the very instructional rule that you should know in the rook endgames, or probably most type of endgames, is that activity is everything. You cannot go for material, or you can't be passive trying to hang on to your material. As you just saw a couple of moves back, there was no point in like saving this pawn. Instead you had to go for the activity, and that's what Rubinstein actually shows with his prowess in this rook endgame. He, after this move of pawn to e4, plays this move of rook to c5. Now you can see that the material right now is completely equal, but look at the difference in the quality of these two rooks. One rook is completely dominating, attacking everything, threatening all sorts of nasty things, whereas one rook is actually on the side doing absolutely nothing. So that is why the position is actually completely winning for Rubinstein, because he has activity for his rooks, and in rook endgames activity is everything. So now Duras actually supposedly attacks this pawn, but Rubinstein correctly assesses that even though he can take and the material is equal, it is hard to convert this majority versus this majority, which is actually, like you can see that there is no one to stop this majority, whereas this majority is currently being guarded by these two pawns, which is completely correct by Rubinstein. So Rubinstein actually now another brilliant move from Rubinstein. Now you can see that in this position many of us would just maybe see that we can push the pawns and maybe we'll start pushing the pawns. That is completely fine, but Rubinstein instead plays this very nice move of rook to a7, cutting the king off on the 7th rank, because a rook on the 7th rank is known as a pig, because it literally attacks everything, because majority of the pawns are on the 7th rank. And with this move of rook to a7, Rubinstein is basically killing off all the counterplay that black thought of having. So after that, rook now decides to go to the g1 square. Maybe Duras's idea is to put the pawn behind the passer, put the rook behind the passer, because that is what you should do in the end games. If your opponent has a pass pawn, you should probably try to put your rook behind the pawn such that it is easier for you to defend. But in this position that is not possible, because Rubinstein just plays this move of b5, and after rook to b1 you can see that after a move like a4, these two pawns are nicely supporting each other and it's difficult to break their synergy. So after a4 we have g5 from Duras. He is just trying to get some play for himself, but that is not possible because now Rubinstein plays this move of rook to b7, and you can see that his idea is to push the pawn because then this pawn wouldn't be hanging. So actually Duras here goes and attacks the pawn that is there on the a4 square. And now another brilliant understanding from Rubinstein in this position is that he absolutely does not care for his a4 pawn, and instead he believes that one pawn on b6 square is enough for him to win, because you can see that yes, this pawn and this is also a pawn, but when a pawn reaches to a square like b6, already just two squares away from queening, you can see that this pawn is definitely not equal to this pawn because this pawn is certainly becoming a queen. And Rubinstein correctly assesses that because after takes he can just play a move like rook to a7, and you can already see that there is no stopping b to b7 and b8 queen. So Duras actually tries here to survive from this position, but that is not possible absolutely because b7, and you can already see that now I am actually threatening to give a check here and then queen, and let's say if you decide to sidestep this check, then already after b8 queen you can see that you are down a queen and getting mated very soon. So instead we have this move of g4 from Duras. Duras is trying maybe everything that he can in this position to survive, but this position is not survivable because as our idea was to give a check and then promote, Rubinstein decides exactly that he gives a check with his rook on the 8-8 square, and after the king moves he just queens here, and now you can see that black is just down a queen. All he can do is just take this queen, and after rook takes, this is completely winning for white because he is up a rook and these pawns are no match for this rook. These pawns will fall eventually. So Duras decides to try for a couple of moves, but after this move of king to f1, you can already see that this king is very dangerously placed here. In couple of moves it will either get mated or already there is a severe material loss for you. So Duras actually decides to resign in this position, and rightfully so. When you are down a rook, all you can do is probably resign. Against a player like Rubinstein, of course you can decide to resign because he is such a great player. So this was the game that I wanted to show you guys. I found this game very instructional because it had a lot of nice concept that as a beginner you should know, because from the starting itself we saw that you should not bring your queen out in the opening itself because then it can get weirdly placed and all sorts of tactics could come in the position. Rubinstein not just showed his brilliant positional understanding and also showed some nice tactical understanding with his move of knight to e5, wherein he was able to swiftly win a pawn, and after he won that pawn, he was also able to swiftly convert that by not allowing black to have a bishop pair and simply bringing his king into the game, understanding that he has to take control of the open file. And after he got that open file, ignoring the fact that black can just take here and be completely materially equal, but he understood that activity is more important than material, and he was able to just convert this game very easily against a very formidable opponent by just making sure that he played very uh, active and very moves that were, every move had some threat of its own, and in this way Rubinstein was able to make a very nice game for us that we could learn from. So I hope you were also able to find this game instructive and were able to learn from this, and I hope you enjoyed this video. So if you enjoyed, please make sure to like this video because it helps grow the channel and I can bring more such games for you guys. So I will see you in the next episode with another cool instructive game. Until then, bye bye.